All right, we're ready to go. Council President, we're ready to go.
Great. So we're all set and broadcasting now? Thank you.
Correct. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Good morning, everyone. My name is Lisa Bender. I'm the president of the Minneapolis City Council. I'm going to call this adjourned meeting of the City Council for April 3rd to order. As we begin, I'll note for the record that this meeting has remote participation by members of the City Council and city staff as authorized by Minnesota Statute Section 13D.021 due to the declared local public health emergency. At this time, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll so we can verify a quorum for this meeting.
Councilmember Palmisano.
Present.
Councilmember Gordon.
Here.
Councilmember Cano.
Here.
Councilmember Wright.
Present.
Councilmember Fletcher.
Here.
Council Vice President Jenkins.
Here.
Councilmember Schrader.
Here.
Don't say anything.
Councilmember Warsame is absent. Councilmember Cunningham.
Present.
Councilmember Ellison.
Present.
Councilmember Goodman.
Present.
Councilmember Johnson.
Present.
Council President Bender.
Here.
There are 12 members present.
Let the record reflect that we have a quorum. Colleagues, the agenda for today's meeting is before us. Are there any amendments from council members? I don't see any. I will note that I'm going to take up items 1 and 2 under new business first, which is the report from the mayor on the local public health emergency and the associated resolution to update our prior action extending the local emergency and the first 5 administrative regulations issued by Mayor Fry under his emergency powers. And before the mayor speaks, I will ask the clerk and the city attorney to just recap that process for all of us and for members of the public. But if there are no objections, I'll put forward the motion to adopt the agenda with that change in the order as I've described. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll on adopting the agenda.
Councilmember Palmisano.
Aye.
Councilmember Gordon.
Aye.
Councilmember Cano.
Aye.
Councilmember Wright.
Aye.
Councilmember Fletcher.
Aye.
Council Vice President Jenkins. Jenkins. Councilmember Schrader.
Aye.
Councilmember Cunningham.
Aye.
Councilmember Ellison.
Aye.
Councilmember Goodman.
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson.
Aye.
Council Vice President Jenkins.
Aye.
Council President Bender.
Aye.
There are 12 ayes.
That carries and the agenda is adopted. That brings us to the order of new business. The first item before us is the report of Mayor Fry related to the local public health emergency resulting from the presence of coronavirus. Before I recognize the mayor, I'd like to note for my colleagues and the public that this standing report is one that we'll receive at all of our regular council meetings during this emergency period. And before we begin, I'll ask Mr. Clerk if you could please describe briefly and perhaps trading off with Mr. Nielsen the local public health emergency and how we got here, and sort of what's the council's role in extending the local public health emergency.
Certainly, Madam President, I'd be happy to start with that and invite Mr. Nielsen to add or correct where I may misstep. As you know, the mayor on March 16th did declare under Title VI of the city's Code of Ordinances a state of local public health emergency in the city of Minneapolis. That the state of emergency was then extended by formal action, a resolution of the city council, which was adopted at an emergency meeting conducted on March 19th. That extension then continues the state of local public health emergency within the city of Minneapolis, concurrent with the peacetime state of emergency that was declared by Governor Walz for the entire state of Minnesota. Under the Code of Ordinances, during a declared state of emergency, the mayor also has additional executive powers to proclaim emergency regulations related to the general safety and public welfare of the residents of the community. After issuing the declared state of emergency on March 16th, the mayor did issue 5 emergency regulations. Those regulations, as required both under the charter and the mayoral directive, were posted to the city's website and also to the official bulletin boards outside of the city council and clerk offices here at City Hall. Broad distribution was also made available through releases to local news media as well. Those 5 emergency regulations were also extended as administrative actions by the council as part of its resolution to extend the period of declared local state of public health emergency. So the condition of local health emergency and those 5 original emergency regulations continue in force and effect as allowed under the Code of Ordinances, which says that any action of the mayor continues in force and effect for 30 days or as extended by the city council. So the city council has both extended the declared state of local public health emergency and those first 5 emergency regulations that were promulgated by the mayor. I would invite Mr. Nielsen to add or correct any of my statements.
Thank you, Casey. As usual, you're right on point. I don't have anything additional to add. You've got it right.
And so then, thank you so much, Casey and Eric. For each meeting going forward, we'll receive the report from the mayor and then have an action before us to both extend the local public health emergency and the newest regulations beyond that 30 days. So the whole package will stay together in time. Is that correct?
Madam President, you are correct. There is a resolution listed on the agenda under new business today, number 2, which you've moved up to the top of the agenda. I will only point out for council members that agenda is the same agenda that was adopted at the emergency meeting on March 19th. The only additions are shown in underlined text. Those are the new provisions that are being added to that original action. So as you have said, what we are doing is keeping that together as a package moving forward throughout the declared state of local emergency.
Thank you. I am hearing from some members of the public that our broadcast is not broadcasting. So I realize it says that we are on your end.
I'm sorry, Madam President. The technical team is aware of that issue. The broadcast is not working, but the webcast is. And so the webcast is working from the city's website under the Council TV link. The other piece to note is that because that webcast is working once the meeting is over, of course, we can always provide full access to the meeting as it continues.
Okay, thank you. And then I'll just check and make sure that the mayor's office has is all set to go, and then we will turn to the mayor's report under item 1.
We are all set to go, Council President. Shall I begin?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this will be our first regular report from Mayor Fry. We have a lot to cover in this first report because so much has happened. So I know the mayor will plan to pause, periodically throughout the report to see if there are clarifying questions, but we can also gather questions so folks can put themselves in queue, and we'll just pause periodically to answer questions so that we're able to get through all the material. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you so much for your collaboration throughout this crisis. Members of the City Council, thank you so much for having me here today. I know we've had formal and informal conversations through the policy group and impromptu phone calls as well these past few weeks just to stay in touch, but I appreciate this formal opportunity to connect with all of you again. My goal today is to provide you an overview and update on the work occurring within the city enterprise along with this emergency declaration. And my hope is that because of increased communications that we've had in previous days and weeks, many of the things that I share with you today, you've already heard, and so they're not necessarily information. As Council President just stated, this is going to be a somewhat lengthy report, and so I'm going to pause periodically to see if there's any questions. So first, we began an emergency declaration on March 16th. That emergency declaration, as you know, was to expedite processes, make our moves at City Hall more fluid. And the way I like to look at it is it gives us the efficiency of the executive with the brain power of the collective. And we've seen that through both the policy group as well as some excellent input that we have consistently gotten from city council members. So there have been 9 emergency regulations to date. The first was obviously the closure of bars and restaurants to everything but takeout, drive-through, as well as delivery. The governor followed shortly thereafter with a very similar regulation that we then adopted ourselves to make sure that we were united in purpose, as well as the legal ramifications as well. Following that, we saw close to 100% compliance the day the emergency regulation went into effect, which was Tuesday, March 17th. We did have compliance officers working around the city, and so we were pleased that our Minneapolitan businesses and that our residents have very much been following the orders that have been given. Following that, there was a procurement emergency regulation that allowed us to, of course, procure supplies and necessary goods quicker. Next was an adult daycare center regulation that there are adult daycare centers throughout the city, and those daycare centers are geared towards allowing seniors to come in, to socialize, to watch some TV, maybe have a cup of coffee. But the issue is they are very much a hindrance to flattening the curve of this virus. And so we closed them down, and although there are important health care needs that are accomplished there, we found that they could be accomplished just as well out elsewhere without some of the difficulty.
Mr. Mayor and Council President, I'm so sorry to interrupt the meeting. There are some technical issues with both the webcast and the broadcast right now that we need to pause for just a moment. I would recommend, Council President, that when we restart the meeting, we start with the beginning of the mayor's presentation in order to assure that all council members and the public who are monitoring this are able to hear everything that we're saying and that we have a good record for future reference. So I'll be back momentarily.
Thank you, Mr. Carl.
Yes, Madam President.
Oh, I was just saying, thank you.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Clerk, just to, we're pausing and waiting for the technical issues to work out so that the public can hear the presentation. And so you'd like us all just to stand by and you'll let us know when we're ready.
Correct. Thank you, Madam
Thank you.
President. Again,
Thanks
apologies.
so much. No, thank you. Okay, it looks like everything is fixed and resolved. So, Mr. Mayor, thank you. I think we should begin again from the beginning, if you don't mind, so that folks can hear the part that was apparently covered up by some jazz music as you were speaking. So thanks for everyone's patience. And Mr. Mayor, I think we'll have you start from the beginning.
Thank you, Madam President. I don't know that if I'm going to sound as cool this time, given the absence of the jazz music, but I will proceed nonetheless. Thank you, Madam President, members of the City Council, for your collaboration throughout this crisis. We've had formal and informal conversations through the policy group, and impromptu phone calls these past few weeks to stay in touch, but I really do appreciate this formal opportunity to connect with all of you. And my goal today is to provide you an overview and an update with the work occurring within the city enterprise since the emergency declaration, provide the public with an update of all the work that has been happening here at City Hall and in people's homes now given the stay-at-home order. And my hope is that because of the increased communications, both internally and externally, many of the things that I'm sharing today are perhaps not new information. The emergency declaration was called on March 16th. And since then, there have been 9 emergency regulations to date. The first, which I'm sure you have heard, were the bar and restaurant closures. The bar and restaurant closure happened quickly. The state followed suit shortly thereafter, and it was closed for everything with the exception of delivery, takeout, and drive-through. As a result, we saw close to 100% compliance the day the emergency regulation went into effect, which was Tuesday, March 17th. Following that, we issued an emergency regulation regarding procurement, allowing us to purchase supplies and necessary items faster than going through the normal process. Third was a shutting down adult daycare centers. Adult daycare centers are generally used by seniors that are looking to socialize, have a cup of coffee, watch a little bit of television. And the issue is, although it is a really nice amenity for seniors, it's also it's a place where the virus can easily expand and be contracted by many people. And so those were very quickly shut down. The following one was land use applications. We suspended land use applications because we didn't have a process in place allowing for public hearings. And if we didn't suspend the land use applications, they would be granted within a 60-day period according to state law. Hopefully that by working through the Planning Commission and with the clerk's office, we can work to institute a public hearing process allowing land use applications to move forward as soon as possible. And as soon as we're able to do that, I very much would like to suspend this regulation and revert back to our normal city process. So we're going to be working with the clerk's office to hopefully move in that direction in the very near term. We signed an emergency regulation waiving late fees for the renewal of any food, taxi, liquor, wine, beer, or catering licenses. And that was necessary given that several of these businesses weren't operating anyway at the time. And given that several of these entities are on dire straits, it didn't make sense to cause unnecessary burden to them. The paid leave policy at City Hall was an extensive one. Our city of this was signed on March 16th. And Families First Coronavirus Response Act that was passed on March 18th. Both went into effect this week on April 1st, and all city employees who are non-emergency responders and are unable to work or telework regardless of status are eligible to request up to 80 hours of paid sick leave if they meet 1 or 6 different criteria. I'm not going to go extensively into the paid sick leave policy. It's a quite long document, but I very much appreciate all of our staff and our city council members who did work on this. Next was an emergency regulation suspending business license renewals, again, to provide necessary relief for these businesses. Next one was suspending pedal pubs. And then the final is a procurement amendment. And I'll note that along with this procurement and contracting amendment, with the support of Joy Marr-Stevens from the Division of Race Equity and Director Corbel of Civil Rights, we've embedded language in our most recent regulation to ensure that we use race equity lens as we make decisions. There's a whole lot more to this report, but I just wanted to stop and pause briefly to see if there were any questions specifically regarding the makeup of these emergency regulations, the 9 of which have been passed.
Thank you. Colleagues, are there any questions? If you have one, you can type your name in the chat queue. I'll just pause and see if anyone wants to ask any questions. Councilmember Kano.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes,
okay.
Please go ahead.
I have questions from residents who are wondering how the city is enforcing social distancing rules at grocery stores that are owned by cultural communities, because they notice that there's a lot of aggregation of people there in those spaces, and folks don't feel safe going up to those areas saying, hey, you should really be practicing social distancing. And so then they'll call me and they'll say, hey, what's the city doing to make sure that everyone's following the rules? So I don't know if you have information to share about who we can call or how we can make sure that there's proactive outreach to those small grocery stores, especially the ones that are owned by communities whose primary language is not English, so that we can be making sure that they're changing their practices of how people congregate there and shop there.
Madam President, Councilmember Cano, thank you for the question. We have been doing extensive work on communication and education regarding what this stay-at-home order means and regarding the importance of necessary social distancing. Those communications have been translated. We have our NCR department that is doing extensive engagement, as well as our health department. And that's actually something that I'm going to get to in more robust fashion further in this report. In addition to that, yes, we are enforcing. Both police officers as well as inspectors are enforcing this order, and it is done in an escalating fashion, meaning that we start with education, we start with outreach, we start with communicating what this order actually means, and then it gradually goes up if the order itself isn't followed. So of course there are eventually fines that are associated with a failure to comply, but those fines are very much a last resort. And I can give you, council member, a few more specifics that are later on in the presentation regarding the extent of the outreach that has taken place, and that outreach will be ongoing. Any further questions about the emergency regulations? Keep in mind, there's a whole lot more on other pieces if I haven't addressed them yet.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Is there any other question from council members on this section? I don't see any. Oh, Council Vice President Jenkins.
Thank you, Madam President. I have less of a question, but just wanted to update. The state legislature is working on developing a fund for cultural communities to communicate. So support for media, radio stations, newspapers, etc., to be able to really lift up and highlight the messages from the governor, from the mayor, from the Department of Health, to make sure that people are able to understand the social distancing and other regulations. So that support should be coming pretty soon to cultural media outlets to help inform the public, the non-English speaking public.
Great, thank you. And MDH also has a number of resources in languages other than English, as well as a existing program, I think, sharing information through multiple sources, including news media. So we've been really appreciative of the state's support for our cultural community so far. Exciting to hear that more resources are coming for that. Anything else for this section of the mayor's report? Seeing none for now, let's move on, and then we'll also have time for more questions at the end.
Thank you, Council President, Madam Vice President. So next is the health report, and I know that you've been receiving regular updates from our Commissioner of Health, Gretchen Musicant, but we continue to not monitor the numbers coming out of CDC and MDH, and as of the last snapshot in time, there have been approximately 22,394 completed tests, and on a per capita basis, that's actually pretty solid in the state of Minnesota. We know that the numbers of people contracting that we're seeing formally are very small compared to the numbers of people that actually have the virus, but the more we test, the more that we're able to have that dashboard from which we make decisions. The total approximate number of completed tests from MDH Public Health is 8,580. That's out of the 22,000. And then the total approximate number of completed tests for external laboratories are 13,814. Total positive tests as of most recently are 742. Patients who no longer need to be isolated of that 742 is 373. So approximately half of the total positive tests no longer need to be isolated. There have been 18 deaths so far. Hennepin County has 235 positive tests, with the city of Minneapolis at 81. And we know with the most populous and densest city, we very much are going to be on the front lines of this battle. Hospitalization, total cases requiring hospitalization are 138. Hospitalized as of today is 75, and then there are 38 people right now in the intensive care units. In addition to that, the health department is in collaboration with OEM, Office of Emergency Management, and they continue to serve as the city expert and advisor on social distancing. The Information and Investigation Unit is tracking data, including Minnesota and Minneapolis cases, as I noted. The health department is distributing a limited number of supplies, such as gloves, masks, and both N95 as well as surgical masks, sanitation supplies, thermometers, to healthcare partners, long-term care facilities, community clinics, and other organizations, making sure that those who are on the front lines have the necessary products that they need at their disposal to keep themselves safe as they battle this virus. The Community Engagement Branch collaborates with NCR and 112 community organizations to determine needs, share technical guidance, and connect resources. We've got 65 locations in Northeast, and Cedar Riverside, and they've been visited to provide social distancing best practices, signage, and coaching, to Councilmember Cano's point earlier. We're launching a donations management unit as well to gather community needs and connect offers for donations to where they will be most effective in the community. Planning with CPED, MPD, and county to provide COVID-19 educational information as well. And finally, we've conducted 927 site visits and electronic educational outreach to all food, entertainment, and indoor recreational facilities, including pools and adult daycares, to inform them exactly what rules they need to be following. The Office of Emergency Management and Workforce have been doing quite a bit of work as well. They continue to track our city's workforce availability to maintain essential functions of government. And to date, we have good news. And that is our daily rate of workers on duty is consistently between 89 and 91% of the total workforce. I'll say that again, around 90% of the total workforce presently is consistently functioning, working, and are in constant contact with the greater enterprise. Since March 18th, the percentage of city employees working remotely has obviously increased from 55 to 80%, and that is excluding both police and fire, who are obviously working on site. OEM is also on the front lines monitoring situational awareness trends, impacts, and resources, specifically as it pertains to our need for personal protective equipment and alternative medical site resources. And we've heard from cities around the country the need for PPE. We've considered the need for PPE, for ventilators, for respirators, and to make sure that cities are armed with the proper resources and gear that they need to combat this in a safe manner. As you know, the second and most recent emergency regulation the most recent regulation, the city and mayor gives the city and mayor more flexibility in the procurement process. And after signing that, I immediately authorized 500,000 protective masks to be purchased. Obviously, that's a really important part. Those masks will help assist both city enterprise departments as well as beyond. And a summary of the process during the emergency declaration is I'm going to speak to in just a bit. To date, purchases have amounted in total to $665,000, 558, and that was through March 31st, 2020. And the services procured have ranged from protective equipment to hand sanitizer to emergency and mental health services. And I believe this report was also shared by the Ways and Means Committee last week, and a detailed line item is also attached in your packets. State and federal funding. The governor's peacetime emergency was announced on March 13th. With that, we saw, of course, the closure of restaurants and bars. We've also see social distance learning become a reality for public school children and their caregivers, and a stay-at-home order, which is effective through April 10th. And as you know, the Phase 3 federal relief bill, including $2 trillion for various COVID-related programs, and the state passed a $330 million bill last week. So that's $330 million that can supplement the $2 trillion that is going out to collectively the nation. The federal bill allocates monies to states and counties, but it does not allocate money directly to cities under a population of 500,000. So again, it goes to states, it goes to counties, and cities with populations over 500,000. However, if you are a city under 500,000, and Minneapolis is just slightly under 500,000, then there is a pass-through going through our state legislature, our governor, and then to cities. And of course, we would want the prorated share of any of those monies. And we're in constant contact with our governor's office to make sure that we receive those necessary monies. We are waiting intently for for agency guidance to be released, although that exact timing is somewhat unclear. Once that information is available, I'll be able to share in more detail with you. And our IGR team has been working very closely to ensure that we have absolutely up-to-date guidance on where the money is flowing, how it's flowing, if there are any parameters as to its spending, and then that allows us to best complement, not duplicate, the amounts of monies that we have coming in. We have been in regular communication and coordination as well with our local jurisdictional partners. Hennepin County, Minneapolis Public Schools, the Park and Recreation Board are also each on the front lines for different segments for our residents. And we're finding ways to support each other, including on topics like food insecurity, childcare, homelessness, street closures for recreation and exercise, and much, much more. And of course, we saw the Park Board close several of the parkway systems around our city, and that work is supplemented by our own work in the Public Works Department. $100,000 in Federal Emergency Solutions Grant, that's ESG funds, is being right now repurposed and dispersed to Hennepin County to assist with increased demands on our homeless shelter system. We are seeing increased stress to our shelter system right now, which is inevitable as people lose their jobs. They aren't able to pay rent in some form and then experience homelessness. And so this assistance will support our city county office to end homelessness efforts, to expand shelter hours, to increase staffing, and increase cleaning in our shelter system. This goes somewhat beyond the normal framework, which has the city outlining funds specifically for capital, but now we're making sure, per actually a city council action, I believe it was last year, that we're doing case management work as well. And I'll get to our gap funding package shortly, which will highlight the specific collaboration with county as it releases the housing assistance, and as well as the work with MPS and the Stable Schools program. Council President, I'll stop real quick if anybody has any questions.
Great, thank you, Mayor. Are there any questions from council members? Councilmember Cunningham.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for this update. I am curious, the White House said that dollars will begin being allocated April 24th. Do we have any timeline around when the state will then be allocating those dollars?
Madam President, Councilmember Cunningham, I do not have a timeline right now in front of me from the state. I'm not sure if Mr. Ranieri, who I believe is with us, has a further update to supplement my own.
This is Gene Ranieri. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can.
Yes, Gene, thank you. Go ahead.
Okay. We have been in contact with the governor's office, not only ourselves, but the League of Cities and others. They expect guidance to be out hopefully before the 24th. So then the policies of the governor's office will probably be done, starting discussions with what the guidance probably after Easter. But the money's starting to flow on the 24th, but guidance isn't expected to about right around Easter. Then we will be working with the governor's office to make sure that some of those guidelines will allow money to flow to the city. So a short answer is there's no guidance yet from the feds.
Great. Well, thank you for that information. I appreciate it.
And Mr. Ranieri and his team are working on a large summary of the federal and state dollars that have come sectioned out by aid type, and it's almost, I think, ready to share with council members. They're also working on a more public-facing version as well. So we really appreciate all the work from IGR working to get more of that detailed information to council offices.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? I do also just want to note around the issue of folks gathering in groups, our city health department is also providing support to the park board. So I know council offices and our own staff are getting questions and comments about folks gathering in public spaces. So our health department is in touch both with the staff at the park board as well as elected officials on the park board, helping support them in their decision making, helping respond to questions and concerns from the public, and I think sharing some guidance about more public communications as well as upcoming decisions that the park board will be making around their own public spaces. I don't see any other questions, Mr. Mayor, so I think you can go ahead to the next section, and of course we can always take more questions later again.
Thank you, Madam President. Regarding communication, we've changed the way we're doing business here at City Hall and throughout the community. And here's some ways that we've formalized that in just the last few weeks. There have been internal changes, obviously, and then there have been external changes. Internally, there have been a number of ways where we've collectively been more intentional about working more collaboratively with one another. There are regular council staff and mayor's office calls throughout the week. The policy group meets 3 times per week, which was a suggestion from council president and council vice president to include that in a formal capacity in the emergency declaration itself. I think that was an excellent move. And department heads meet twice a week on relatively long calls to make sure that they are all up to date and informed. And importantly, we've instituted a weekly city-county leadership check-in that includes health, emergency management, administration, and then elected leadership. And I just want to pause just to really say thank you because council members, I feel like the communication that we've had has been working smoothly. I have been able to receive really solid input that is then incorporated directly into the emergency regulations and policies that are passed. It has been helpful, and we've been able to also relay information through some of these mechanisms that I just mentioned. Externally, we also continue to do our best to reach a very broad audience. My office produces somewhat daily video to try and offer some of the most current things that are happening in the city. This week we joined Senator Klobuchar and Congresswoman Omar in public discussions. This is our 3rd week running of hosting a webinar with the business community as well, and we've had webinars and conversations with our Latino community, which will be a relatively weekly occurrence. In addition, I know City Communications is spearheading multicultural and multilingual outreach via radio, along with a COVID-19 newsletter and fast-paced website updates. Obviously, as we work through some of these technological issues, we may have to do a little bit of additional work to make sure that the information is getting out properly, but we are definitely moving in that direction. Also starting this week, there are 6 community briefings have been planned and have been in large part executed for American Indian, Southeast Asian, East African, African American, senior, disabled, and LGBTQAI plus communities by NCR. And I, along with council members, have been participating in them as well. A couple of additional actions, as well as a preview of some ideas that I think that are important to highlight in brief. My office, along with Councilmember Schrager's office and the Office of Sustainability, Homegrown Minneapolis, is looking into ways that the city can help support residents access food during this difficult time. Councilmember Cano has regularly been on calls with the Latino and business community. I'll be joining AARP on April 13th for a teletown hall with their Minneapolis membership. In a joint effort between many city departments and Tattersall Distillery, over 1,000 bottles of hand sanitizer were successfully procured, 800 of which were purchased by the city and went to Minneapolis public schools, first responders, and others. Additionally, Race Equity Division set aside $200,000 in recast funds to support mental behavioral health providers and community cultural healers in meeting the needs of Minneapolis residents who are experiencing stress and trauma as a result of COVID-19, and applicants can apply for funds ranging from $2,500 to $7,500. Arts, culture, creative economy, is working with Springboard for the Arts to establish a $10,000 contract for emergency relief support in the form of direct cash assistance of $500 dedicated to self-employed artists and creative workers. ACCE is also working with the Metropolitan Regional Arts Council to establish a $20,000 contract for emergency relief support in the form of general operating grants of up to $1,000 dedicated to Minneapolis resident small arts organizations and informal groups. And as a result of Governor Walz's stay-at-home executive order, over 180 people experiencing homelessness and staying at the Salvation Army Harbor Light Center were struggling with what to do during the day. And a portion of Curry Avenue has been shut down, and with $28,000 of financial support from the city of Minneapolis and Hennepin County, there are now tents, tables, and chairs, security by Mad Dads, porta potties, and hand washing stations, and meals that can be provided. And so this is all set up with social distancing at the forefront and the ability to do the necessary heightened cleaning without having guests around. We know that our homeless and highly vulnerable population is particularly hard hit by this crisis, and this is one of many ways that we can help. Council President, I'm about to jump into the GAP funding package, and so I'll pause briefly to see if there are any questions on the section that I just went through.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Are there any questions from council members? Councilmember Kano.
Thank you, Madam President. I hope you guys can hear me. I just wanted to thank Mayor Fry for being accessible when we hosted our first Latino call, which was that first week of your declaration of emergency. So you were able to help us kick off those efforts and bring the community together in this important time. That momentum has kept going, and so I'm really thankful for that partnership with you. And I know your staff are on that email listserv that continues to grow. And now that the Neighborhood and Community Relations Department is duplicating that model with, or replicating that model with other cultural communities, my office is going to then go merge efforts with NCR to continue to have those calls with the Latino community members and aides from your office to ensure that we're communicating with that specific community around the cultural needs, the language needs, and the efforts that are needed for us to really make sure that we don't leave that community behind. So mostly a message of thank you for making yourself available for that conference call about 2 weeks ago.
Madam President, Councilmember Kano, thank you. And every single council member, I'll say, has stepped up in one form or another to enable us to access their areas of expertise, their connections within community, and the specific relationships that they have built out over years now with the residents that they serve. Without these relationships, undoubtedly, we would not be able to act as quickly and as effectively as we are now. And that, I mean, I could name every single person here, but from, Councilmember Goodman, who obviously has great experience in going through emergency declarations like this before and the financial aspects associated with it, to Councilmember Palmisano, to Councilmember Steve Fletcher, who I know has been working on a fund in conjunction with our unions. And I could go on and on and on. Everybody has had a role to play here. And I'm just so very appreciative of that role. And the information, by the way, that you all have provided to both Council Vice President and Council President Bender is relayed on a very routine basis as part of these policy group calls. So now getting into the
Thank you, Mayor. Looks like Council Vice President has a question or comment.
Thank you, Madam President. I do have a question. I know, Mayor, you talked about Salvation Army, but do we know if other homeless shelters are discharging people during the day? And if so, are we creating any kind of, or is the county creating any sort of safe spaces for people to be? That has been a concern that I've been hearing about, is that homeless shelters are discharging people during the day.
Council Vice President, thank you. In general, yes, homeless shelters do discharge people during the day. What we have been making sure to have is giving the ability for our homeless shelters to comply in a safe manner with the orders that have been provided by the governor. And as I mentioned, there were additional monies that were provided to enable them to do so in some form, whether it was Harbor Lights or otherwise. To further answer that question, I'm not sure if this is best directed to either Andrea Brennan or David Frank, who I believe are also on the calls. We go to them.
Yes, let's see if staff is available, and if not, we can always follow up as well. And I think also I have been imagining that in the next few weeks at our new policy committee, we can have some of these more detailed updates about business supports, housing supports, etc. So I don't see them jumping in. I think we can move on now, and we can get this question answered either here during the meeting, or offline as well. Thanks, Mr. Mayor. You can go ahead.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Council Vice President. I'll also note that I've been on multiple phone calls with state and federal leadership asking for assistance specifically in the area of homelessness and shelters. And so these are funding areas, of course, that I think are going to be all the more important in the coming weeks and months. And given that we have been very proactive, both at the city and state level, we do have additional time to prepare for the inevitable curve coming with contraction of COVID-19. So now getting into the gap funding plan. To combat COVID-19, leaders have to act quickly, but our actions must also be informed by the best possible obtainable data. And that's how the city of Minneapolis has approached assembling its new set of gap funds to support renters, to support families, workers, and businesses. And in just the last week, as I mentioned earlier, there have been $300 million coming from the state legislature, and the federal government advanced a record-setting $2 trillion package to support residents and businesses that are impacted by this pandemic. And so we want to make sure that our new programs complement, not duplicate, the work made possible by the state and federal funding. And I was just on a call last night with Senator Klobuchar on this very topic. And so I'm proud to announce that in partnership with the City Council and city leadership for this gap funding, I'm dedicating more than $5 million for Minneapolis residents and businesses hit hardest by this crisis. So that's an over $5 million gap funding plan, and I will now go into it in depth. First, on gap funds for housing. COVID-19 has changed nearly every facet of our lives, but it hasn't changed city leadership's core conviction that housing is a right. And here's how the Minneapolis Gap Funds for Housing will help ensure that that right is more guaranteed to our residents. First, we are moving forward with $2 million in emergency housing assistance payments to help low-income residents who've lost their income due to this crisis. In addition to the $2 million in emergency housing assistance, we're also infusing $1 million in the Stable Home, Stable Schools initiative for a total of $3 million in gap funding for rental housing. That final $1 million is transferred over to the emergency assistance as opposed to the longer term. So that's for a total of $3 million for rental housing and assistance. The amount of assistance will be largely dependent on the individual needs of the household, taking into consideration other resources the household is eligible to receive. And in most cases, the maximum amount of assistance will not exceed $1,500, but providers will have the flexibility to provide up to $2,000 under extraordinary circumstances for a household. Eligible expenses can include rental and payments, rent in arrears, rent due within 15 days, and utility payments. And the payments can be made in many cases directly to either the owner or the utility company. Eligible families, to be eligible, you got to reside in Minneapolis. You got to have an income that's 30% of area median income or below. And you have to have experienced a significant loss of income from self-employed or any other source due to the COVID-19 emergency. Households are eligible regardless of immigration and documentation status. I'll say it again. Households will be eligible regardless of immigration and documentation status, and the program is designed to serve households that are not served by other COVID-19 related federal or state assistance. So that's with the $2 million. Then there's an additional $1 million in the form of the Stable Schools Emergency Expansion. The existing Stable Home, Stable School Housing Fund, which provides one-time or short-term assistance to families experiencing homelessness or housing instability, will be expanded to address COVID-19 related housing instability on an emergency basis. So with up to $1 million added to the program's housing stability side, the expansion will open eligibility for the fund to all 39 of the Minneapolis public elementary schools. So it used to be around 15 schools that were eligible, and now it will be eligible to all 39 Minneapolis public schools. In most cases, just like the former housing assistance plan that I just mentioned, the amount of assistance will not exceed $1,500 per household, but it can go up to $2,000 when the circumstances are extraordinary and are necessitated. Eligible families will have at least one child enrolled in MPS's 39 elementary schools. As I mentioned, got to have an income at 50% of AMI or below, and that continues with the program's status. And households are eligible regardless of immigration or documentation status, just like the previous. For both the Emergency Housing Assistance Program and the Stable Home, Stable Schools Emergency Expansion, the plan is for the intake process to be managed through the Tenant Resource Center. And so the TRC, it's a community collaboration which provides support for renters, including emergency assistance, workforce, legal assistance, mediation services, and our team is working hard to launch the funds and begin. We hope to accept applications in just a couple of weeks from right now. As application process details are being finalized, and by the way, when we receive those applications, we're also going to be prepared to start the assistance immediately. So as application process details are being finalized, the Tenant Resource Center will be able to provide some additional information. And information about how and when to apply for these funds will be available on the city's COVID-19 webpage and disseminated widely as the process is finalized. Two more pieces regarding housing assistance that are not necessarily new funding, but will and can be transitioned to assist in the time of COVID-19. The first is the Naturally Occurring Affordable Housing Preservation Plan, which
doing pretty limited things right now, but you can fill out the application online.
So we're also preparing to respond to new opportunities and guard against speculator behavior that may come in the time of crisis. And our nonprofit NOAA preservation partners, including Land Bank and LISC and AON, they're expecting to be able to prioritize NOAA acquisitions during this anticipated downturn of the economy. And we saw this back in 2008 and 2009. Speculators came in, they swooped up foreclosed upon properties, they swooped up properties that were in that were vulnerable, had vulnerable tenants perhaps in them for very small amounts of money. And then over the next several years, they continued to rent out, in some cases, contract for deed or rent to own agreements that largely hurt some of our most vulnerable communities. And what we can do with these funds is use them, not just for taking the opportunity of a downturn in market and purchasing city properties to preserve them as NOAA, but also to meet some of the public health challenges that may inevitably be posed by COVID-19. Finally, the city provides $275,000 in funding to the Minnesota Home Ownership Center. And during these very uncertain times, homeowners can now turn to this resource to protect their investment and housing stability. The Minnesota Home Ownership Center has a network of free homeownership advisors who provide guidance about homeowners' options, including how to contact mortgage lenders and request relief options. We know that loan modifications are already happening through the mortgage industry right now, and we want to make sure that people who own a home, who are perhaps under stress because of a loss of job, have the right contacts so they can get those necessary loan modifications. They can stay in their homes, and hopefully we do not see another foreclosure crisis like we did in 2008, 2009. I know this was very important for Councilman Cunningham, and so I wanted to mention this facet. Council President, that is all I have for the housing side of things, and I will stop before moving on to the business side of the emergency gap funding.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have 2 council members in queue so far. Council Vice President Jenkins.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you again, Mayor, for the work in putting together this package. I think it is really going to be of great assistance to some of our most vulnerable families and community members. I'm curious, is the Tenant Resource Center a physical location? And if so, where is that located?
Excellent question, Council Vice President. The Tenant Resource Center is a collaborative between many different entities. I believe it's Land Bank. No, I'm sorry. It's a collaborative between several different entities. I'm gonna call on David Frank and hopefully Andrea Brennan if they're now on the line.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, this is David Frank from CPED. Council Vice President, to your question, the Tenant Resource Center is a collaborative of different partners. It is not in a physical location. It's groups that have come together to work on this effort in housing and in the other topic areas that the mayor mentioned a few minutes ago.
Thank you. So will the funds be then distributed through these collaborative member? I feel like there needs to be a physical location for people to go.
Council Vice President David Frank again. We are working on the process right now. As the mayor mentioned, we are going to be working very, very hard over the next few weeks. There will be a phone number for intake that we will publicize very widely. In this era of distancing, we're not sure a physical location is the very best way to do it. So there'll be information available online, and intake will start with a phone call. And again, it's a collaborative of lots of different organizations. So I'm not sure about a physical location at this time.
Okay, thank you. And then, Mayor, I had one other question. You mentioned the Home Ownership Center. Is there funding support in your package for the Home Ownership Center?
Madam President, Council Vice President, the home ownership support has already been approved and allocated by the City Council and Mayor in the previous budget. It's at the tune of $275,000. And so what we're doing and directing in this time is having that $275,000 go towards guidance and support and free service specifically to people that are suffering from COVID-19 related ailments. And so I don't know if Council Member Cunningham wants to further elaborate on that, as I know he's been working on this topic.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
Mayor.
Mr. Mayor. Councilmember Cunningham.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. I really don't have anything else to add. Thank you for including this and really thinking about community wealth building through the perspective of through home ownership. I also just want to mention that these services are available in Hmong, Somali, and Spanish. So they are available across cultures, and this is going to be like this is going to be a critical resource in order to make sure that homeowners are able to find out all of the options that are available to them during this crisis to help put some parameters in place to help protect from a hopefully prevent another foreclosure crisis. So thank you, Mayor, and thank you for asking the question, Council Vice President, and thank you, Madam Mayor, or Madam President.
Thank you, everyone. Okay, I have Councilmember Kano in queue next to ask a question.
Thank you, Council President. I just wanted to share a couple of things and then ask a question of the mayor. I got a message from some of my constituents who are listening in. They're Spanish speakers and they have an interpreter with them. They're just asking if folks can speak a little bit more slow so that the interpreter on their end can catch up with us. So I know we'll all do our best to keep that in mind. Mayor, this is a really strong package. I really appreciate you stepping up to the plate and hopefully hitting it out of the ballpark here soon once all the details are completed. I have a question in terms of the flexibility of the use of funds for housing assistance. We know that many undocumented families have informal housing agreements. They might be renting an unfinished basement in somebody's home. They might be renting a bedroom in somebody's home. There may or may not be a lease involved or a formal rental agreement. So just curious, is the funding that's being proposed right now, will that be able to support those families who might be a part of the informal economy?
Councilmember Kano, yes. And first off, let me say, lo siento, yo voy a hablo más lento en el futuro. So the answer is yes. We want to make sure that the funds are as flexible as possible with respect to the situations that many people may be dealing with, including those who are undocumented. I will give very clear direction and have given very clear direction to Andrea Brennan in housing to make sure that we can find a way to deliver services and resources to those that need it most. And we are well aware that the contractual relationships that some in our community have are not necessarily the standard. So regardless of whether you have a formal lease or not, we can still work to help.
Thank you. I appreciate that that openness to dig down and figure out a way to make sure this aid gets to the most vulnerable. Some of us have been in constant communication with our state elected officials and other nonprofits who have been sounding the alarm for a few days now, saying, look, there's going to be a major population being left out of all the stimulus bill packages, out of all the unemployment insurance offerings. And so having the city step up to fill that gap is strategic, smart, and most of all, caring. It shows that we care for everyone in our community. I did want to ask, in the event that we, I don't know, for some miraculous reason, get a moratorium on rent payments and mortgages, either through the federal government or perhaps some action at the state level. I know many of us council members have signed on to the letter that's going to be sent to Governor Walz on this issue. Will this housing assistance be able to respond to cash needs in case that folks no longer feel the pressure of paying rent or paying a mortgage, assuming that, of course, our city money probably won't be out hitting people's pocketbooks within the next, 2 to 4 weeks, because it's going to take us time to roll out this package. It's going to take us time to put the infrastructure together. So in the event that we do get a moratorium on rent payments and mortgages, would this allocation be able to respond to different needs, such as food, buying masks, medical supplies? I know folks are stocking up because they're not sure what the future is going to look like.
Madam President, Councilmember Cano, the funds in the $3 million format between both the emergency rental assistance and the stable home, stable schools rental assistance are in fact geared towards housing. We are making sure that they are flexible as possible within the housing framework. And what we are hoping to do is work with our federal and state partners to fill in any of the gaps that need to be filled in, whether that's food, and yes, there are monies going towards that, or that's additional PPE that you had mentioned. And so we're going to have several different pots of money that will tackle perhaps a range of different facets. And we're going to make sure that it's again complementing, not duplicating some of the work that's already happening. Thank you. Great.
Thank you. And Councilmember Cano and Mr. Mayor, I want to thank both of you for all the work in communicating with cultural organizations and members of the community who have gotten in touch about this. I know we've all made the commitment to share some of the details of application process as soon as they become more available, so that we can make sure that the application that we set up and the way that it's, the information that's required and all of that is set up in a way that makes it truly accessible to the folks who are most in need right now. So thank you both for that and for that commitment from you, Mr. Mayor, as well. Councilmember Ellison is next.
Thank you, Madam President. I just wanted to first thank the mayor for this package. I think it's highly informative, and I'm excited to hear the rest of it. I did want to just speak to Councilmember Cano mentioned the letter. A number of us from Minneapolis and St. Paul and the surrounding suburbs are writing a letter to the governor around the issue of rent payments and mortgage moratoriums. I think it's great that we're making sure that we're trying to keep people housed. I know that the state is, representatives at the state are trying to get a $100 million fund to help with rental assistance. But I also wanted to say that at some point, we're not going to have enough money to cover people's rents. The state's not going to have enough money to cover people's rents. And so I do hope that folks sort of lean into this, this idea that we've got to come up with a more creative solution. And to Councilmember Cano's point, also, people have competing priorities. People's ability to feed their families has a lot of pressure being put on that. And it feels like if everybody's being asked to squeeze a little bit tighter, that it's only fair that banks and landlords sort of take on a little bit of that burden as well. Whereas of right now, they're not. So if folks have any questions about the letter to the governor, please feel free to reach out. And that's all I really wanted to say. So thank you for the package, and I look forward to the rest of the presentation.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Cano.
Thank you, Madam President. I just wanted to say I got a text message from Mexican Consulate Gerardo Guerrero, who wanted to send a special thanks to Alcalde Mayor Fry and to the regidores, the rest of the City Council, that he really appreciates us and you, Mayor, leading the charge to step up for the Mexican community, for the undocumented community. So I just wanted to share that on the public record. Mil gracias.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments from council members on the housing portion of the package? Councilmember Fletcher.
Thank you, Council President, and thank you, Mayor, for this presentation. I'm really supportive of getting housing assistance done. I think this, this makes a lot of sense, and I think you found some funding that makes sense for this. As you and I talked about over the last couple of days, though, I am concerned, to echo Councilmember Ellison and Councilmember Cano, that we are going to need some support that is not tied to housing, that at some level we need to support the people who are slipping through the gaps and make sure that we're giving them choices and agency about how they meet their most urgent needs, within this. And so I'm curious sort of where your thinking is about sort of how between the various jurisdictions and philanthropy and everybody else, I know you said this is something that you're working on. I think it would be valuable to hear where we're at so that we can figure out where we need to go to get some people whose needs aren't going to be met by this, who are still going to be in a bit of a gap. Some of the support that we know we got a lot of constituent contact asking for over the last couple of days.
Madam President, Councilmember Fletcher, you are right. This package has been first geared towards filling gaps in areas that the federal and/or state legislature did not. There are monies obviously coming from the federal and state legislature in the area of food assistance, food insecurity, as well as healthcare in support for our hospitals. And we have also seen monies coming in, and we hope to see more monies coming in support of business assistance. This was a gap that presented itself now. Importantly, there are two things that are important. One, given the nature of this emergency declaration, we are able to respond and shift quickly depending on where the need is. And let me assure you, council member and the public, that we will. And that goes with respect to these monies and any others as well. And secondly, we do expect monies coming in from both the state and the feds in the very near future. And once those monies come in, we can figure out how best to resource our own.
Thank you, Mayor. Anything else from council members? I will just add here, my thanks to you, Mayor, and your staff and all of the city staff who've been working really around the clock on putting together this package. We know that this amount of money that we're able to put forward now as a city, as we face our own declining revenues and budget issues coming in the future, is a small portion of the need. We have something like 30,000 cost-burdened households in our city, and we, as Councilmember Fletcher and Ellison just talked about, the structural issues in our housing markets across the country really need to be solved at the federal level. Cities on their own can't possibly fill in all of the gaps of debt that's owed by our residents without a massive investment either in the real estate industry geared toward stability of houses and homes and businesses, or direct assistance to families and business owners themselves. But this money that we have now is intended to be targeted, to be quick, distributed more quickly than the other sources that are coming. And we know it's not enough. So I really appreciate all the advocacy that council members are doing, and the mayor, our staff, working to try to make sure the voices of our constituents are heard in those state conversations and those federal conversations. I know we were disappointed that the legislature, it was the Senate really, that wasn't able to come to support $100 million of rental assistance. That would have made a big difference in Minnesota households and Minnesota families. And we're hopeful that the next round of assistance from the state will include more funds for rental assistance, so that communities across the state that are much smaller than us, that have much more difficult financial circumstances, are able to support their families and community as well. So I do see Council Vice President in queue for another question or comment as well.
Thank you, Madam President. I know you still got a little ways to go on your presentation, Mr. Mayor, regarding small business assistance, but I just want to say I just appreciate the fact that we, as a council, as a city, as a staff, as the mayor, are still able to uphold and stand up for equity in our community. And I think this package reflects that as well. And our entire response has been really centered around equity. And so I just wanted to name that and appreciate that in the middle of your presentation, and I'm looking forward to hearing the rest. Thank you.
Thank you. It looks like that's what we have for now. So Mayor, you can go ahead with the next section. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. Council Vice President, you're exactly right. You know, the council passed the Strategic Racial Equity Action Plan, and to abandon that work in the time of crisis would be to abandon the principles that we laid out beforehand. And you are exactly right, and I appreciate the comment midway through. The final piece that I'll go over is the Minneapolis Gap Funds for Small Business. And we know that there is no corner of our city that COVID-19 will leave untouched, but we know that the economic burden of this pandemic will impact some communities more than others. And we want to make sure that our targeted relief is focused on those that need it most, and it reflects the reality that is on the ground. And as Council President mentioned just a second ago, we are not under the impression that the $5 million in assistance is a cure-all. Sadly, we do not have the finances at the city to provide a cure-all without significant assistance from both our federal and state partners, but we can fill in the gaps and we can protect those in our communities who are most vulnerable. And that is our mission, that is our responsibility. And so that is exactly what we're going to do. And so with the small business funds, with $2.2 million in city funds, which comes out of the Great Street grants, the Minneapolis Gap Funds for Small Business, it will include new small business debt-free funds for companies with 20 employees or less and people who are self-employed, along with shifting an already existing 2% loan program to 0% loan program. And so there's two segments to this. There's the forgivable loans for small businesses, and those will be doled in amounts, in fixed amounts of both $5,000 or $10,000, depending on need resulted from the COVID-19 emergency. The loans can be prioritized near-term working capital needs for businesses, and this includes, but is not limited to, things like payroll and employee benefits, rent and mortgage, accounts payable, and other critical capital needs that they may have. The first fund in these forgivable loans are going to be targeted to areas of ACP 50, green zones, cultural district promise zones, etc. And it'll include businesses that have 20 employees or fewer, $1 million or less in annual revenue, are self-employed workers, as I mentioned, are also eligible, and importantly, immigration status does not impact eligibility. In other words, we are being fully inclusive in who can receive these funds. Finally, we've revamped the 2% loan program to a 0% loan program. This will be available citywide. And we're modifying this 2% program in a couple of key ways. First, again, we're setting the interest rate at 0%, and we're expanding the eligible expenses to include working capital costs. The 2% loan previously did not. And so those loans are available to businesses citywide. The amounts are $50,000 or $75,000, depending on location, and they can also be matched. These loans are originated and serviced by participating lenders that we've been working with. I can get into the specifics, but it's up to 10 years matched by the term of the lending partner's loan. Again, there's 0% interest. Payments can be deferred for up to 6 months. And of course, we know that the COVID emergency will last for many months, and that it will match the deferral terms that the lending partner has. Eligible borrowers they'll have to demonstrate a financial impact from the COVID-19 emergency, which we know that businesses around our city are experiencing. Also have to have 20 or fewer employees and $1 million or less in revenue, similar to the first program that I just cited. Couple more pieces regarding the small business assistance. We are reshaping how our city loans that we already have out will function, and we're trying to be as flexible where we can. And so we've taken a closer look at how these loans are administered and identified several ways. So for eligible and existing city-issued loans less than $200,000 to home buyers and businesses, the city is moving forward with 6 months of forbearance and deferred payments. So I'll say that again a little slower. For eligible city-issued loans, the city is moving forward with 6 months of forbearance and deferred payments. And the city will also seek forbearance on its commercial real estate loans greater than $200,000. Finally, we want to be doing more of what we know is already working. And so we're stepping up with support from our business technical assistance program. And there's a $300,000 boost in funding so that more people can get city support navigating challenges that have been brought on specifically by COVID-19. So maybe businesses were previously getting advice on how to put up an awning or expand a sign or get business assistance or a loan modification of some sort. Now we're also expanding it so that it's directly attacking COVID-19, and we're accounting for things like how to make sure that unemployment benefits flow the quickest and are the most accessible to the employees, how to work through paid sick and safe time issues, and any other associated concerns regarding COVID. And we're also investing, and I know Councilmember Fletcher was working on this, $100,000 in the Twin Cities Hospitality Fund, a partnership fund with labor and civic and business leaders to support low-wealth employees in the hospitality and service industry with micro grants to cover basic needs. So that is the scope of the gap funding package and the scope of the small business work. Again, Council President, I'm happy to stop and answer any questions on that front.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have several council members in queue. Councilmember Schrader.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a great start. It's been great to work with your office. We need to be supporting our local businesses in every way possible. One thing I do want to highlight and be looking for in kind of aid that goes forward kind of after this package, one missing part, at least for businesses in my area, the no interest forgivable loans. These are crucial resources for businesses most in need. And these are businesses citywide that are unable to access the full menu of other resources. Ward 11 businesses are going to be left out with the geographic boundaries that are currently proposed. And I'd just like to see criteria that's put in place that aren't based on geography. We should really be targeting these no interest forgivable loans to businesses that can't access other resources. So our criteria should be kind of correlate directly with that need. And geography is just going to miss some of the businesses that are kind of our community hubs.
Madam President, Councilmember Schrader, I hear what you're saying. Two pieces. One, the 0% loans will be available citywide. And two, we'll be able to adjust this program as we go. And so as it becomes clear where the demand lies and where people who are most struggling lie, the combination of those two things, we can come together to create a package that is most going to those in need at the time. Having things attached to ACP 50 was, at least with the first forgivable loan program, was a mechanism to target, given that, as Council President mentioned, we do not have enough resources to go to every business throughout the city right now. But we will be finding ways to support businesses throughout the city, both with state and federal assistance, as well as city assistance right here.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Gordon and then Reich.
Thank you very much. And I, reviewing the entire gap funding package, I only found this thing that I really have issues with, and it's similar to what Councilmember Schrader was talking about. You know, as a council member, we know our businesses in our ward. We know who's struggling and who isn't struggling. As soon as I saw the package, I thought those forgivable loans were a great deal. I thought of Gandhi Mahal on Minnehaha. I thought of the Nomadic Oasis, the new barbershop that opened on Franklin. I thought of El Norteño, Afro Deli, all these struggling businesses out there that may be experiencing, in fact, I know are experiencing significant loss of income due to the pandemic. And also some of them that I might not even know about, the nail shop on East Lake Street and others that might actually be ineligible because of immigration status for any benefits from the federal government. And I thought, well, here's a great opportunity for them. And then I realized when I looked at the boundaries that they would all be excluded, some of them by a block or two. So I questioned that. I really appreciated the housing eligibility criteria when I saw that. You needed to reside in Minneapolis, have a low income, so maybe that would be a small business under 20 employees, and then have experienced significant loss of income because of the virus, and that it would certainly be eligible to people irrespective of immigration status. I'd say those are great criteria that we could replicate for our small businesses, and then we could be getting at the need. If we wanted to add others, I think we could too. Maybe we could say those that are unable to access the state or federal funding. I would rather come out of the gate with this approach and be flexible and tailor it back in other ways than looking at these boundaries, excluding so many of our businesses who may actually end up failing and having to close permanently because we weren't ready to bring them the assistance that we would now. So I just wanted to weigh in with that. I also want to make sure that it's clear about when the council is going to get to approve this funding package before it goes out. I've already tried to weigh out to my small business groups and the other businesses too, to gather their engagement and their input. So before we approve it, we can collect some of that and get some more comments about it. I don't know that you necessarily have to address those comments. I just wanted to be able to express them as clearly as I could at this time. And I'll just go back on a positive note. Really, the rest of the package seems to be really strong and really positive and a really good first step. And I appreciate all the work that's gone into it. And I even know these comments aren't going to be a surprise to the mayor because we were able to discuss this a little bit already. Thanks much.
Thank you, Councilmember Reich, and then Goodman.
Thank you, Madam President, and I do extend my gratitude to the mayor and of course all the staff team that have been working so vigorously to get something out the door before us and before the public for comment. I share some of the comments in terms of wanting to make sure that we are at this, strike that balance of focus of funds, knowing that we have limited amounts and we're in kind of a triage mode, but also knowing that we want to make sure that we get the dollars where it's needed and not to have to be too doctrinaire in our ways, so we leave people behind that we regret subsequently. I also wanted to note, I do appreciate though this notion of not wanting to be duplicative of other funds, to be coordinating with other funds, and to be targeting with some kind of lens that is need-based. And so I think we're definitely there as a first step. Tweaking can always be invited as we move along. But I also wanted to note that some things, due to no fault of the people involved, they get the sort of double whammy. And of course, I'm thinking of that because of a fire that happened, which coincidentally is in a cultural corridor. And it's also an RCAP or a P50 area full of BIPOC businesses that are not only important to their families, but the families that are supported by the people they employ. So, and it doesn't have to just be a fire. I could think of, maybe a utility break that creates flooding. We're going to go into, potentially a temperamental weather season, which could also bring large-scale impacts. And not to say that they would become a special category, but to know that there's a double whammy there, that we want to work with our partners to reach out to them to maybe dig a little deeper, to see what their needs are that are being missed, given that they're getting two challenges at the same time. But nonetheless, I'm very grateful for what's being done by the leadership team, and continue to be supportive. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Madam President. Just want to share a couple of thoughts. I'm very thankful to David Frank, as well as Eric Hansen and Miles Mercer, Andrea Brennan, and Angie Skildum and their teams for coming forward with the initial proposal to be vetted by elected officials. Ultimately, it's our staff that are coming up with most of these ideas and doing most of the really hard work. And I have talked to staff, as of many of you, and these are folks who used to work 10-hour days, now working 14-hour days from home. It's very hard, and I appreciate all of our staff. And I wanted to make that point. I'm very supportive of the package put forward because I believe it has a true race equity lens. And here's what I mean by that. If we had $2 million to spend and small businesses get $10,000 loans, only 200 businesses overall will get them. So we need to figure out who are the 200 who are most in need. And if you look at the second pool of funding, $2 million in funding, $75,000 loans, 26 businesses total will get these loans. So we're not talking about even probably 5% of the total need in the city of Minneapolis. And when that much funding is spread over such a few number of people, it's proof to us that we will not have the resources to continue in this manner. We will need the state and federal government to allocate money to municipalities to get this money out because the need is so much greater than what we have. And within a mere few months, we're going to be making decisions about laying off our own staff as in an effort to put money out the door. Those are the kinds of choices we're going to need to make. Raise property taxes, add fees, reinstate license fees, reinstate all of the fees that we've put on hold up until now, because we won't have a $1.6 billion budget this year. We won't have the resources in our approved budget. And so that's why it's so critical that Mr. Ranieri and Andrew Johnson and the council president and vice president work with the state and federal government to ensure that money continues to flow to small businesses for these kinds of needs, because the kind of money that we can be putting out right now is going to come into conflict with paying our own staff. And the number of people that we can help is going to be very limited. And when we have that choice, and I assure you, Councilmember Gordon, I was thinking about all of the small businesses in the Skyways owned and run by people of color who will be ineligible as a result of the geographic restrictions. But the truth of the matter is the number of loans we'll be able to give out is tiny. And if it's going to be really tiny, it really needs to be focused on those who need it most and have no access to other services. And so narrowing it down in some way is really not a science, it's an art. And the art that's been decided here is it needs to be focused in these areas of concentrated poverty, perhaps because it's harder for them to do business in those areas. Perhaps because we need economic development in those areas more than other parts of the city. So I just want to give a sense of the scope of all of this. We're not talking about a lot of loans here. And when we have to make decisions about a small amount of money that we have to give out, it needs to really be focused on those who desperately can't get anything from anyone else in locations where it's difficult to do business, as well as continue our efforts to work with our partners at other levels of government to provide the kind of funding that's going to be needed overall. So I'm very supportive of the mayor's efforts, recognizing that very tough choices needed to be made, as well as will continue to be made during this process. And I very much appreciate the work of staff and the leadership of all of my colleagues who have chimed in on these programs.
Thank you. Councilmember Cunningham and then Kano.
Thank you, Madam President. I want to actually echo, thank you, Councilmember Goodman, for speaking to a few of the points that I wanted to address. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for all of the work that has gone into this. I am also very supportive of it, and all of the staff who have been behind the scenes, digging into it, piecing this together to make it happen. Really phenomenal work. I want to speak specifically to the small business assistance. Thank you. As a North Side City Council member, I am always speaking to the challenges, the unique challenges that we face here in North Minneapolis. A lot of times folks don't realize that redlining is still a real issue, particularly when it comes to small business loans and small business supports. When we look at wealth building, so community wealth building, but as well as intergenerational wealth building. We talk a lot about home ownership, but there's also small business ownership is another key way to be able to build wealth. Research has shown that it increases when there's in a Black family, there's a business owner there, their family wealth increases by 800%, and for Latinx families, it increases by 600%. So it's really critical. However, when you have a business in an area that has concentrated poverty, has higher crime rates, has lower education levels, it is incredibly hard to be able to get business loans because they're considered higher risk. So a lot of the supports that are available out there for other areas that don't experience those same kind of challenges are not actually available to areas like North Minneapolis. And a lot of times, there's additional challenges where, because of the fact that folks have lower incomes, these businesses are not raking in a ton of money every year, a lot of revenue in the first place. And so, thank you, Mayor, for creating this additional support. As Councilmember Goodman spoke to, it's not a whole bunch, but this is what an equity analysis looks like. It's challenging when it comes to money because it doesn't look fair, and it isn't fair based on the standards of equal access. But when we look at the amount of barriers that are faced in the areas that are being concentrated through this racial equity analysis, the promise zone, green zones, ACP 50s, by having that concentration, we were really helping to bridge a gap that is faced disproportionately by business owners of color, BIPOC businesses in areas of concentrated poverty. What we know is that businesses that are in disenfranchised communities like North Minneapolis, when they're owned by people of color, who live in the neighborhood, they are disproportionately likely to hire other people of color. They are disproportionately likely to hire folks from the neighborhood. And so it is a community wealth building strategy. Why it is so important is that when we have economic crises like the one we are facing now and will exponentially face in the future as a result of this crisis, we cannot have those businesses fall apart. We cannot have our local economy fall apart because it has large repercussions for employment, large repercussions for income and wealth building. So I just want to say thank you deeply to the mayor and for the tough challenges, the challenging decisions that had to be made with our limited resources. We really do need to lean into our state and federal governments in order to make sure that they are helping to provide the additional support. We cannot lean on property taxes to fill all of the gaps. So thank you. Mayor, thank you to all my colleagues, and I appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Connell.
Thank you, Madam President. I will say that I concur with Councilmember Cunningham's statements as well as Councilmember Goodman's statements. I think we're talking about the difference of of some businesses in the city having their lights off for 2 months and other businesses being boarded up with broken windows for the next 2 years. And so we really want to avoid the situation where we have businesses boarded up for the next 2 years as we wait for the economy to recover. Additionally, we know that many of the businesses in other parts of the city are eligible for deed support and deed funding. A lot of the businesses in the areas that we have identified already through the areas of concentrated poverty map and the green zones maps and the cultural districts maps and the opportunity zones maps are likely not going to be eligible for that deed money. Last week, when we were engaging with our state elected officials and other business support providers in the community, the answer was that no, that deed monies right now would not be able to be used by undocumented entrepreneurs or undocumented business owners. So that's another area of work we really need to figure out. And I think, again, the city's doing a strategic and human humanistic act by stepping in where others are unwilling to go. I'm going to pivot now to my question for the mayor or city staff, who indeed have been doing a ton of work on this, and really thankful to Andrea Brennan and to Andrea Inouye in the mayor's office, as well as our entire CPED team and Director David Frank. My question is around the specificity of the grants for small businesses in terms of differentiating between like a landlord and the actual business. And so I think our intention is to support the small and local entrepreneurs who may or may not be renting from another landlord, who might be making their own decisions about their building and their wealth. And so just curious, are we able to kind of separate through this funding proposal the difference between a landlord who is still asking for rent to be paid by that tenant who happens to be a small and local business owner, and sort of how are we able to really target our supports to the folks who are taking those daily risks to open up small businesses in our corridors versus perhaps a landlord who might be requiring those small business owners who have been essentially shut down to still pay rent. So I just wanted to kind of get a sense of that.
Councilmember Cano, Mr. Mayor, did you want me to respond?
Please, thank you.
Councilmember Cano, this is David Frank. It goes without saying that we are still working all of this out, and we are working on the application website that we hope to have up soon, even as we speak. We expect a very light touch application process. These are business owners and businesses who are going through a lot. We do not need to be a bureaucratic stumbling block here. And it is our intent to ascertain the need and that we are dealing with a business and then to get out of the way. So at the moment, we are not considering asking things about the relationship with the landlord or other matters specific to the business, but instead to confirm that it is a business, that it is a going concern, and that they have a need that's caused by the pandemic.
Thank you. At this time, in the interest of time, Mayor, I'll just ask to see if you have anything else to add in your presentation and then take final questions and comments from council members. The mayor and I do need to leave this call by 11:45. So if the meeting is still going on, I will turn the chair over to Council Vice President at that time. We will be postponing the biz agenda setting that was set for after this meeting until this is done. And I know that we'll also lose some of the department heads at 11:30 or so, but we'll do our best to get all the questions answered. So Mr. Mayor, please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam President. I'll briefly answer questions / respond to a few of the comments that have been made. First, just thank you. Thank you for all of the input. I've heard from each and every one of the council members regarding this plan. I very much do appreciate your support. As Council President mentioned, we have limited amounts of funds here. We do not see this as a cure-all, but with those limited amounts of funds, we wanted to make sure that the money could go first to those that are struggling the most. We passed a strategic racial equity plan. There was a resolution that was recently passed through CPED, all of which highlighted the need for racial equity and making decisions with that lens. To abandon that framework now in the face of a crisis would be to deal in ornamental policy. And so we will have additional funds, as I mentioned, coming from both the state and the feds. We have additional city funds that go citywide. And as we determine both need, regardless of where it is in the city, we will work and do everything possible to accommodate. Moving on from the gap funding package, a couple of final pieces. So first is we have recently instituted a hiring freeze at the city of Minneapolis. And obviously, all of these things that we've just been talking about for the last hour cost us money. And the city is in dire financial position, and we expect revenues to fall short of budget by $100 to $200 million. Thankfully, because of decisions that we've made in the past, the core city services, they will continue to function. Our city will remain open for business. but I felt that it was important to make these decisions now. We're also studying more cost-cutting options for 2020 and 2021 as we expect the impacts of the sudden recession to last several months and potentially years. These are painful decisions, but to be honest, not difficult ones because they're decisions that needed to be made. Undoubtedly, more actions and decisions will face us in the coming days and the weeks and the months to follow. And so, in conclusion, I think it's fair to say that none of us could have predicted this crisis. None of us would have thought that we would be dealing with a pandemic at the time when we ran for office. That was never a question that any of us got on the campaign trail. And we're operating under a new normal today. And I have one perhaps silver lining through these very trying days. I'd say collectively, we're doing one hell of a job. Our city staff and department heads have done amazing work and have been working around the clock. My city staff in the mayor's office, council staff, have been working their tails off to make sure that we're in constant communication and are setting up the best possible policy for our city. We've all risen to the occasion, and I am confident that as city leaders, we will continue to do so. Thank you so much for everything that you've done. This has given me a renewed and heartfelt belief in the city of Minneapolis. And I look forward to all the work that we have ahead. We're going to get through this together. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know the Council Vice President and I have very much appreciated the partnership that we have both in all the informal ways and through the policy group more formally. She and I have both wholeheartedly supported and lifted up our council and mayoral commitments to race equity, and I'm really glad to see that this package centers those commitments, that we're sticking with them, as you said, in this time of crisis more than ever. So I appreciate so much all of the comments and questions from colleagues. We will have time to follow up. Our next one of these briefings is a week from today. And we have all the different ways of communicating and sharing with each other until then. So thank you again, Mr. Mayor, for this update. I know this one was a bit longer with all of the things that have happened since the emergency declaration went into effect. If there are no objections from my colleagues, I will direct the clerk to receive and file this report, and then we will move on to our second item under new business. All right, so that is a resolution that amends our prior action, which confirmed and extended the mayor's declaration of a local public health emergency. It specifically provides that our meetings will be conducted remotely by telephone or other electronic means as authorized under the Minnesota Open Meeting Law. And it also incorporates and extends the 4 regulations that were issued by the mayor since that last action. And those are emergency regulations number 6 related to paid leave, number 7, the business license fee suspension, number 8, the pedal pubs regulation, and number 9, which are amendments to the procurement process. Amendments to the previous declaration regarding procurement. Are there any questions from council members about that item? I don't see any, so I will entertain a motion to adopt the resolution.
So moved.
Moved.
That has been moved and seconded. Is there any other discussion? Clerk, please call the roll.
President, it looks like Councilmember Gordon is in queue. Or
I believe that was he says never mind.
Oh.
Yes, I've withdrawn my thanks.
All right.
Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Palmisano.
Aye.
Gordon.
Aye.
Cano.
Aye.
Wright.
Aye.
Fletcher.
Aye.
Council Vice President Jenkins.
Aye.
Schrader.
Aye.
Cunningham.
Aye.
Ellison,
Aye.
Goodman,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
President Bender.
Aye.
There are 12 ayes.
That carries, and those items are adopted. Thank you again, Mayor, and thanks to all the council members, many of whom didn't speak but have all been participating so much in these details and so much more. So thank you all very much. With that, we'll return to the regular order of business, which starts with the introduction and referral calendar. We have only one item today, which is my motion to introduce, give first reading to, and refer to the Policy and Government Oversight Committee an ordinance to amend Title VI, Chapter 128 of the Code of Ordinances by adding new sections related to succession in the offices of the city's elected policymakers. This is the introduction, so that will refer the draft ordinance for the policy committee next week on Wednesday, when we would receive a staff presentation on this item and have a chance to answer or ask any questions then. Are there any questions from council members now on the referral? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll on the introduction and referral calendar.
Councilmember Palmisano.
Aye.
Councilmember Gordon.
Aye.
Councilmember Cano.
Aye.
Councilmember Wright.
Aye.
Councilmember Fletcher.
Aye.
Council Vice President Jenkins.
Aye.
Councilmember Schrader.
Aye.
Councilmember Cunningham.
Aye.
Councilmember Ellison.
Aye.
Councilmember Goodman.
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson.
Aye.
Council President Bender.
Aye.
There are 12 ayes.
That carries, and that item is referred. That brings us to item number 3 under new business, which is pertains to a special election to fill the unexpired term in Ward 6. I'll ask the clerk to provide a brief summary of this request.
Thank you, Madam President. As council is aware, 6th Ward Councilmember Abdi Warsami was appointed to the Minneapolis Public Housing Authority as its executive director. That appointment was confirmed by this body on March 27th. Subsequent to that action, Mr. Warsami tendered his resignation to me on March 30th, effective that same day. Under the charter, the council has the duty to declare the office vacant, which then triggers a series of actions in terms of filling the unexpired term for the seat. The charter provides that an early vacancy must be filled by a special election. An early vacancy is defined as any vacancy that occurs in the office prior to March 1st of the final year of an elective term. In this instance, that would be March 1st of next year, 2021, which is the year of the next regularly scheduled municipal election. And therefore, this vacancy qualifies as an early vacancy and requires a special election to fill the unexpired portion of the current term. Minnesota statutes restrict special elections to 5 specific days each year. Those include the second Tuesdays in the months of February, April, or May, or in conjunction with the date of the statewide primary in August, or the date of the statewide general election in November. And given the associated statutory and charter timelines required for legal noticing, candidate filing, the 46-day absentee balloting period, and similar matters, the next available date for a special municipal election is Tuesday, August 11th, and that corresponds with the statewide primary. Staff have prepared a resolution before you that would declare the vacancy in the Ward 6 seat and also approve a timeline for the special election to fill this unexpired term. In addition, as required by charter, we prepared an ordinance that sets the dates for the candidate filing period for this special election. If approved, the candidate filing period would open at 8 a.m. on Tuesday, May 19th, and would continue each business day through 5 p.m. on Tuesday, June 2nd, except of course for Monday, May 25th, when city offices are closed for the Memorial Day holiday. Candidate filings will be accepted at the city's Elections and Voter Services office located at 980 East Hennepin Avenue. The 46-day absentee balloting period for the election would open at 8 a.m. on Friday, June 26th, and run through 5 p.m. on Monday, August 10th. The election day itself, as I've noted, would be Tuesday, August 11th, and all polls in Ward 6 would open at 7 a.m. and remain open until 8 p.m. and until all voters in queue at that time at their respective precincts have had a chance to cast their ballots. Outside of that general timeline, Madam President, I would like to add the elections team is working closely with our partners at the Secretary of State's office and at the Hennepin County Elections Office to determine options that are available to us in terms of how we would conduct these elections, specifically whether or not we would have authorization to conduct the election entirely vote by mail. Those considerations continue. We will keep you and the public apprised of any developments in that regard. It completes my presentation, but before I yield, I would like to also note for constituents in Ward 6 that Councilmember Warsami's aides, Ryan and Yusra, continue on and are available to provide assistance and support to the residents of Ward 6 during this interim transition period, and we thank them for their continued service. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. And this action was undertaken in coordination with Councilmember Ellison, who is the former chair of our Elections Committee. So I'll recognize Councilmember Ellison for this motion and then see if there's any discussion or questions.
Thank you, Madam President. I think that the clerk summarized it really well, and I'm happy to move this forward.
Thank you. Councilmember Ellison has moved the item. Are there any has been seconded, and are there any questions or discussion? Council Vice President Jenkins.
Thank you, Madam President. I just want to add that in addition to the very capable staff in Ward 6, I think I can speak on behalf of my colleagues and say that we will all be assuring that the issues and concerns of Ward 6 are met through our council process during this time of vacancy, and just give that added assurance to Ward 6 residents that they can continue to contact the city and continue to expect to get service for the issues that are of importance to that community.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments from council members? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Palmisano.
Aye.
Councilmember Gordon.
Aye.
Councilmember Cano.
Aye.
Councilmember Wright.
Aye.
Councilmember Fletcher.
Aye.
Council Vice President Jenkins.
Aye.
Councilmember Schrader.
Aye.
Councilmember Cunningham.
Aye.
Councilmember Ellison.
Aye.
Councilmember Goodman.
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson.
Aye.
President Bender.
Aye.
There are 12 ayes.
That carries, and the resolution and ordinance are both adopted. That brings us to our final item, which is number 4, a proposed amendment to the city charter recommended to us by the Charter Commission. This is related to the timing and conduct of special city elections, and I'll ask the clerk to provide a brief summary of this request as well.
Thank you, Madam President. As you are aware, there is a conflict between state law passed in 2017, which I briefly referenced. This is Minnesota Statute Section 205.10 Subdivision 3A. It limits the number or the date specifically when elections can be held for special elections of the mayor and city council to those 5 dates mentioned. Those are the second Tuesdays in the months of February, April, May, August, or November. Our charter does not, which was, of course, had a provision prior to the enactment of that law in 2017, provides that any special municipal election would be held within 90 days of a vacancy being declared. So there is a conflict. This proposal, which is referred to the council by the Charter Commission from its meeting this past Wednesday, April 1st, would seek to clarify that law by removing the requirement in charter for a 90-day special election timeline to align with the law as it now exists in statute, which reflects the special dates that are allowed under that state statute I referenced.
Thank you. Similar to the last item, this was also done in coordination with the former elections chair. So I'll turn it over again to Councilmember Ellison for a motion and then open it up for questions and discussion.
I'm happy to move. Wait, sorry, which item are we on? I'm not clear.
Yeah, thank you. This is just the referral of the charter amendments that would bring our special election process into alignment with the new state laws.
Yes, I'm happy to move approval.
Thank you, Councilmember Ellison. Councilmember Ellison has moved to refer this to the Policy and Government Oversight Committee for the next cycle.
Second.
Has been seconded as well. This will include a public hearing at the POGO committee. Is there any questions or discussions on this item? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Palmisano.
Aye.
Councilmember Gordon.
Aye.
Councilmember Kano. Councilmember
Aye.
Kano. Councilmember Wright.
Aye.
Councilmember Fletcher.
Aye.
Councilmember Jenkins.
Aye.
Councilmember Schrader.
Aye.
Councilmember Cunningham.
Aye.
Councilmember Ellison.
Aye.
Councilmember Goodman.
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson.
Aye.
Council President Bender.
Aye.
There are 12 ayes.
That carries, and that item will be referred to the next Policy and Government Oversight Committee, which will be held on Wednesday, April 8th. So that has been referred. The next order is the order of announcements. Are there any announcements from council members? Council Vice President Jenkins.
Thank you, Madam President. Wednesday, April 1st was National Census Awareness Day. So I just want to publicly remind all of our residents to please fill out your census as we are living through one of the most unprecedented times in our history. We recognize the importance of the census and how making sure that everybody is counted brings resources to our communities to set up healthcare facilities, to take care of our transportation networks, to make sure that we can move goods and services throughout our city and country. And so just want to remind everybody the importance of completing the census and making sure that everyone in our community is counted, including our newborn babies. As we know, children under 5 are some of the most undercounted members of our society. And so we need to just make sure that everybody counts, regardless if you are undocumented, if you are just living in a home without a formal lease agreement. Wherever you are, we need to make sure that you are counted in the 2020 census. So just wanted to make that announcement, and I know that my colleagues and city staff and the great work of Alberta Gillespie will continue to remind people. The census deadline has been extended through August to make sure that that we can get everyone counted. So just wanted to make that announcement today. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. Are there any further announcements? Seeing none, we have concluded all of the items on our agenda for this meeting. With no further business before us and without objection, I will declare this meeting adjourned. Thank you. Thanks everyone for all your work this week, and we will reconvene all of us together next Wednesday as the POGO committee. We are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye, everyone.